So this battery is quite low. Do we have charged battery? I mean, at the moment it's half, just 2 bits we have. Oh, here. She has. It's okay. Doesn't need to change immediately. Maybe later we may need. Yeah.
Do you want me to change it?
Maybe change later, no?
Yeah.
Have a little bit light. Oh, yeah.
A few extra copies of the text for those who hear it for the first time.
Okay.
Hand them out now.
Yeah, do that.
There's a few extra copies of the text on just above Sue's head. Those of you who weren't here yesterday, we haven't got them.
And don't worry, the text that you start to read, we were not in that area. So, but you can have it because we are going to read the last part of the text. Yeah. Oh yeah. We are going to start this first session, making sure our intention being here and to participate the sessions with our body, speech, and mind. So having a positive, a constructive mental state, mind is very crucial to have the helpful, useful results from the participating the class. Helpful and useful to oneself right here and now, and also for the others, and also in their long-term benefits. As I mentioned yesterday morning, and many of you already know this, my role here is, simply to remind ourselves and to encourage ourselves to join the class, with a constructive intention. What kind of constructive and positive minds, then it is up to the individuals. I strongly believe in that, basically we all have abilities, potentials to experience many layers of positive mind, regardless of having different upbringings and having different the social backgrounds and so forth. We all have the potential and ability to experience many layers of positive mind. Only the thing is we need to make them stronger, enhance them, make them bring them forefront of our mental states, forefront of our daily lives, and that is what we need to do. And coming here and the participating this kind of classes, usually it helps to ourselves to enhance this kind of mental states. So therefore, try all our best to have a positive, a constructive mind. Then, of course, people who have spiritual path, like the teachings of the Buddha, then set your intention, set your mind according to that spiritual path you are following. Like here, majority of us follow, the teachings of the Buddha. And that's what we are going to prepare our minds, thoughts, and emotions. First, going to read Prayers to Shakyamuni Buddha. That is in page 5. And these verses help us to recall 3 very helpful, useful mental states. The first, to recall the 3 jewels, the Buddha, Dharma, and the Sangha. As a follower of the teachings of the Buddha, then recalling, remembering, thinking the 3 jewels, the Buddha, the teacher, the mentor, and Dharma, his teachings, and the Sanghas, his followers. That having that mind at the beginning of this kind of gathering, and in fact in the morning, and every now and then to recall the 3 jewels in our mind will be very, very useful. Of course, I'm talking about people who have taken the Buddha Dharma, the teachings of the Buddha, as one's own spiritual journey. I think it is also the same. People who follow the other spiritual traditions, recalling, remembering that particular spiritual, traditions, founder, their teaching, their teachings, that will be very, very useful. And so, reading these verses, the first thing help us to have that kind of recollection or remembering of the 3 jewels. Then, second important, the recollection is, the essence of the teachings of the Buddha. Essence of the teachings of the Buddha. That is minimum, intentionally, deliberately, not cause harm to others' lives, others' their possessions, others' feelings, others' status, and the environment where they live. And that is the minimum, what we should try to live our life as long as if we follow the teachings of the Buddha. And then if it is possible, then very intentionally, very deliberately try to support well-beings of others. Others, without any particular selections, without any particular, or without any discriminations. The support, the help might be very, very simple, very, very simple, and the number initially might be very small, but the intention, the mind, the mental state, try to be free from self-interest, free from egoistic sort of purpose or reason, no matter which way we try to support very nicely or giving small things, but try to. So that is the essence of the teachings of the Buddha, living our lives. Whether we are very deeply, profoundly, elaborately learned the teachings of the Buddha, all those philosophical points, the theories, or all those very colorful, the sort of, the rituals and so forth, or not. If we are able to live our life in that basic level, in that way, then we'll experience the benefit of the teachings of the Buddha by following. Particularly you guys, choose to follow the teachings of the Buddha, not your not your own cultures, not your own forefathers' spiritual path. You deliberately, choose to follow. Then it is useful to try to follow it, in a very constructive way, in a very meaningful way, not in a taking some sort of another baggage to cause difficulties to oneself and to others. It is perfectly possible in the aspect of the spiritual, and then in reality, that what you have adopted, then also again use to for the purpose of the same other samsaric things, and that will be sad. So this the second important reflection is the essence of the teachings of the Buddha. And the third reflection, remembering here, is among the the teachings of that Buddha had given, the many teachings on the many different the points, and one of the most important teachings that he had given was to his followers to remember, to think, to contemplate, to realize the nature of the impermanence, all the things and events, including oneself, there are impermanence. That's what the Buddha taught, and that is the fact, that is the reality. We experience that in our everyday lives. So very, very important, the teachings to be recalled. So reading these verses with reflection or remembering of these 3 points will be useful as a starting for the class. So we'll read these verses, page 5, and we'll read these verses with a strong and a clear, and clearly imagining the historical Buddha is present in front of us, where the Buddha statue is. Not in a form of statue, but as a real person, as a real being, with his all the great qualities, and particularly his fully cultivated compassion and loving kindness towards all living creatures, and that includes ourselves, and also his fully developed great wisdom. So strongly and vividly imagine the presence of the Buddha, and then read the verses. To the founder, the endowed, transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond, the third destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge, in good conduct, Sugata, knower of the world, supreme guide to human beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and human beings, to you, the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed, transcendent destroyer, conqueror, subduer from Shakya, are prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. To the founder, the endowed, transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond, the third destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge, in good conduct, Sugata, knower of the world, supreme guide to human beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and human beings, to you, the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed, transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, subduer from Shakya climb, are prostrate, make offerings, go for refuge. To the founder, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond, the third destroyer, the completely perfect, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge, in good conduct, Sugata, knower of the world, supreme guides human beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and human beings, to you, the complete and fully awakened one, endowed transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, subduer from Shakya climb, are prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. When, O Supreme, amongst humans, you are born in this earth, you pass our 7 stripes, then said, I am supreme in this world. To you, who was then, are prostrate. With the pure bodies, formed supremely pure, wisdom ocean like a golden mountain, fame in the places, the best, winner of the best. With the supreme signs, spotless moon, color light, to you are prostrate. Dust free like you, the 3 worlds are not. Incomparably wise one, to you are prostrate. Savior having great compassion, the founder having all understanding. The field of merit with qualities like vast oceans, to you one thus cosmos are prostrate. The purity frees one from attachment, the virtues one free from arounds, the path through the Chaitanya. Those who are liberated, those who are shown path to the liberation, the holy field qualifies realization, who are delivered moral precepts, to you the sublime community intending virtue are prostrate. Homage to the Supreme Buddha, homage to the Dharma refuge, homage to the great Sangha, to all 3 endeavor homage, to all worthy of respect, bowing as many atoms all in all aspects, with the supreme faith I pay homage. Do not commit any non-virtuous action, perform only perfect virtuous actions, subdue your mind thoroughly, this is the teachings of the Buddha. A star, a mirage, a flame, an illusion, a drop of dew. A dream, flash, lightning, cloud, sea conditions, things as such. Through these merits may sentient beings attain the rank of seeing, subdue for faults, be delivered from samsaric oceans, perturbed by waves, aging, sickness, and death. Yeah. Next, in page 9, the Heart of the Perfection Wisdom Sutra. We read this sutra. We read this sutra for 2 reasons. The first, it is, according to the Mahayana tradition, this sutra, Heart Sutra, belongs to one of the group of the sutra called Perfection of Wisdom Sutras, and in Sanskrit, Panchaparamita Sutras. And, it is useful, helpful, to have some kinds of sutra to read, as teachings of the Buddha, to remind ourselves, the teachings that the Buddha had, the historical Buddha had given, and reading this kind of short sutra, it helps to feel to develop sense of connection, sense of connection towards the Buddha. That's the first reason to read that. The second reason to read the sutra is the last 2.5 or even 3 years, a group of us to read this text, not this sutra, the text that written by this great 14th century Tibetan teacher, Geshe. And subject matter of that text, the essence of true eloquence, and is really the subject that this Heart Sutra deals with. In that way, there's to make the connection, the text that we have read and we are going to read today, the last part of the text, is in terms of the subject matter, it is directly connected to the teachings of the Buddha, like the Heart Sutra, and to have that kind of the understanding, that kind of feeling that what I'm studying, what I've studied and what I'm studying, the text is, in fact, as far as subject matter is concerned, directly related, connected to the teachings of the Buddha. So for those two reasons, and also people who are able to meditate, contemplate the subject, emptiness, and through the reading of the sutra, that will be great. That will be great. But if it's difficult to meditate on the emptiness while we are reading, just to think. And the historical Buddha Gautama, had given this amazing teachings to his followers, and that those teachings are still continue up to the present time, and the teachings are given, to really initially to reduce, to minimize the living beings' sufferings, and eventually to overcome, to completely free from, the suffering and the origins of suffering, and as we have seen many times, that's the main reason why the historical Buddha had given these teachings. And thinking I myself have the opportunity to listen, to contemplate, to learn, and also to put into practice, to take into in my daily lives, is something very fortunate, very grateful to have that kind of opportunity, and thinking that way also useful. So we'll read the Heart Sutra. Thus did I hear at one time, the Bhagwan was dwelling in the most virtuous mountain in Rajgir, together with great community of monks and a great community of bodhisattvas. At that time, the Bhagwan was observed in a concentration on the categories of phenomena called profound perception. Also at that time, the Bodhisattva Mahasat Aya Avalokiteshvara looked upon the practice of profound professional wisdom, beheld those five aggregates also as empty inherent nature. Then through the power of Buddha, the Venerable Shariputra said this to the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Aya Avalokiteshvara. How should any son of the lineage train who wishes to practice activities of profound professional wisdom? He said that, and the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Aya Avalokiteshvara said this to the Venerable Shariputra. Shariputra, any son of the lineage or daughter of the lineage who wishes to practice the activity of profound professional wisdom should look upon like this, correctly and repeatedly beholding those five aggregates also empty of inherent nature. Form is empty, emptiness is form. Emptiness is not other than form. Form is also not other than emptiness. Likewise, discrimination, compositional factors, and consciousness are empty. Shariputra, likewise, all phenomena are emptiness, without characteristics, unproduced, unceased, stainless, and not without stain, not fulfilled. Shariputra, therefore, in emptiness, there is no form, no feeling, no discrimination, no compositional factors, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no sound, no taste, no object, and no phenomena. There is no I element, and so on, up to, including mind and a mental consciousness element. There is no ignorance, no extinction of ignorance, and so on, up to and including the aging and death, no extinction of aging and death. Similarly, there is no suffering, origination, cessation, and path. There is no exalted wisdom, no attainment, also no non-attainment. Shariputra, therefore, because there is no attainment, Bodhisattva rely on and dwell in the perfection of wisdom's mind without obscurations, without fear. Having completely passed beyond error, they reach end point of nirvana. All the Buddhas who dwell in the three perfections, enlightenment in the reliance on professional wisdom. Therefore, the mantra of professional wisdom, the mantra of great knowledge, the unsurpassed mantra, the mantra equal to unequal, the mantra that thoroughly pacifies all sufferings, should be known as truth, since their professional wisdom is there. Shariputra, the Bodhisattva, Mahasattva should train in profound professional wisdom. Then the Bhagwan was rose in consultation and commanded Bodhisattva, Mahasattva, Aya Avalokiteshvara, saying, well said, son of the lineage. It is like that, it is like one should practice profound professional, just as you have indicated. The Tathagata's voice. The Bhagwan having thus spoken, the Sharitatiputra, the Bodhisattva, Mahasattva, Aya Avalokiteshvara, those sounding in the entirety along with gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharvas, were overjoyed and highly praised the spoken by Bhagwan. And page 27. And these 4 lines help us to experience, to hold, to very constructive, very useful, helpful mental states as a follower of the teachings of the Buddha. The first is the mind taking refuge in the Buddha as a one's own teacher, mentor, his teachings, Dharma, as a to be applied in our daily lives, to be lived with, to be experienced, actualized, and his Sangha as a one's own spiritual friends, supporters, that we share our experiences while in the spiritual journey. The experiences of joys, happiness, fulfillment, disappointment, difficulty, share with them is something important. So holding mind as the Buddha at the end of the class, at the beginning of the day is extremely helpful. So the first 2 lines help us to do that. And the last 2 lines help us to hold, to experience another important the mental state. That is the mind of enlightenment, in Sanskrit, bodhicitta. People who follow the Bodhisattvayana teachings, technically called Mahayana teachings, holding this mind, at least trying to experience, to have this mind, or trying to our mind tune into or transform into mind of enlightenment is something you to do as a following the Mahayana teachings. The mind which genuinely, sincerely cares, concerns, well-beings of all living creatures, regardless treat them from mind without any discrimination. Try to feel that, think that, and try to work with that mind. Will be, this last two lines help us to do that. To live our lives with that mind, including in today's class. So we'll lines. Sanje chöda tsoje chonam la chanju pado dane japso che dage cheje jibe tsonam ki dola penje sanje doba jo sanje chöda tsoje chon chanju pado dane japso che dage che gebe so namanji dola penje sanje parasho sanje cheda soje chona chanju pado dane japso che dage che gebe so namanji dola penje sanje Oh yeah, thank you. Oh yeah. So at this session, we will conclude the reading of the essence of the true eloquence. Then we'll have, a brief break, tea break, and then come back. And then I would like to read more in an oral transmission, the praise in dependent origination, but the same author, Geshe Kaba. So that way, we're going to conclude, today's class. Oh yeah. So the main body of the text is already finished in yesterday afternoon. Yesterday afternoon, in the last session, we finished the actual main body of the text, and today's our reading is very much from the from page 381, from the last paragraph. That is what today, this session, we are going to read. And that is really very much the part of the Geshe Kaba concludes writing this text. So before I go straight to read this, what I would like to do, I would like to first to say, the few words on the the why it is so important, that the topic of this text, that is emptiness. The why us to important. Why it is important us to understand, and the nature of emptiness. The relation to all the things and events, and particularly in the this kind of like the Nagarjuna, and following the Nagarjuna's the text, those some of great Indian masters, and then including the Jasonkarpa, the writer of this text. The emptiness is explained, taught, relation to the mainly relation to the one's own identity, or who we are and what we are, I or the self or the person, doer or the experiencer. Then slowly extend to understand the emptiness, relation to our possessions, starting from the body, then feelings, and so forth. Then extend to all the things and events. Why it is so important, and it is important to understand these teaching on emptiness, because the historical Buddha and the subsequently Buddhist teachers have repeatedly said, right at the beginning of his teachings, the teachings of the Buddha, and repeatedly said that the main cause, the origin of the source of our the difficulties, challenges, the predicaments that we are very much within ourselves. And if you people who are familiar with the Buddha's teachings of the Four Noble Truths, when he taught the first noble truth, there he said there is dukkha. There's a dukkha, there's a suffering, and that suffering comes from the second noble truth. The origins of the suffering comes from within ourselves. The cause of the suffering, the origins of the suffering is within ourselves. When he taught the second noble truth, and when he taught the third noble truth, these two, the first noble truth, which is the suffering, and the second noble truth, which is the origins of suffering, these two also can be extinguished, can be stopped, ceased within ourselves again. And that path, the means and methods, to be to extinguish, to cease the suffering and the origins of suffering, is also should be developed within ourselves, not something outside from us. So in that case, this the realization of this topic, emptiness, which is the main subject of the text that we read last 2.5 or 3 years, is directly connected, related to the Buddha's first teachings, and also subsequent his other teachings. So therefore, it is directly related to one's own well-beings, and through that, to extend well-beings of all living creatures, striving putting effort, resources, giving time within ourselves to understand this subject, emptiness, shunyata, is one's own, for the sake of one's own well-being, because if we really manage to enhance, develop, cultivate this realization, the realization of emptiness, and this way, this will really deals with root of the source, main source of our difficulties. So as we all care ourselves, we all care our futures, we all love ourselves. If that's the case, then of course there are many different ways to make ourselves happy, make ourselves joyful, make us there are many different ways to reduce our fears, concerns, worries, anxieties. There are many different ways, including having a delicious cake may reduce some of our fears. But for the long term, and very trusted solution, a very very valuable solution, and the long-term solution. If we follow the teachings of the Buddha, solution to make ourselves happy, fulfilled, and reduce our pain and the difficulties, anxieties and fears, worries, then these kind of cultivating these kind of realization, understanding will be the wise way to do that. The wise way to do that. So therefore, the topic of this text, the essence of eloquence, this text is something really worthwhile to explore, to put efforts and so forth. And also, it is not just one's own well-being. If we have these realizations, if we have these understandings, it is also through that realization, through this understanding, we may able to support others in a more effective way, more profound way, and we may able to give them help for their long-term needs. Although their immediate needs, food, shelter, medicines, and friendships, advice, are very, very important. But it is also equally important to search for solution, or search for solution or answer for the long-term well-beings of living beings for their long-term. And that way, among the many different solutions, and having cultivation of this realization is one of the very trusted, worthwhile solutions. So that's the first thing I want to say. Now then, what I'm going to do, I'm going to briefly, not any detail. It is impossible me to recap, the 3.5 years or 4 years, or 2.5 years or 3 years, what we have studied in this text. But I really just, to benefit to myself and to benefit to the people, particularly people who are here. Some of you here, all those 3 years, almost every single weekend, once a month weekend, you have been here. Some of you here on and off, and some of you are here just today. It may benefit to all of us what this text really captures. Also, we will see when we start to read the conclusion of the writers, we will see from there too. So the text itself deals with this subject which is emptiness. And it deals with the subject of emptiness from the two minor philosophical schools viewpoint. That is, the two minor philosophical schools are mind-only school, Chittamatrin or Yogacara, and Madhyamika, middle way schools. So emptiness is explained in this text from the point of view of these two minor schools, philosophical schools' point of view. And we skip the first. So we haven't read a single page relation to the explanation of emptiness from the point of view of mind-only school. What we did is we read the beginning of the text, which Geshe lays down the first, pay homage to those relevant great teachers that he had, and then he gave really something important, the reason why it is so crucial us to get this topic, emptiness, as Buddha taught, as Buddha intended, to get that topic very correctly and very precisely and in a very detail. And he gave very nice, and also along that, he gave a very good advice based on this quotation, this verse which quote very often, like His Holiness Dalai Lama almost quotes every single time when he gives a talk or the teachings to the public. And that quotation, that verse is saying how to approach to the teachings of the Buddha. And the verse strongly suggests approach teachings of the Buddha like the goldsmith buys or have his or her gold. Like the goldsmith very thoroughly checks his or her gold through the different stages, rubbing, cutting, burning, and so forth, to check the qualities of the gold. And in that verse, Buddha said, you should approach to his teachings like that, not just out of faith, out of devotion, or just the Buddha says so, not in that fashion. And that is in the right at the beginning of this text. And also, he along that he Geshe mentioned, to understand the teachings of the Buddha in general, and then particularly to understand this particular topic, emptiness. We should approach in Tibetan Rigpa Jadakene Zubatse. Rigpa, reasons, logics, or arguments, whatever term that you use. In Tibetan, it is called Rigpa. So from the many, hundreds of different reasons, arguments, should be put forward, should be applied to understand this subject. Not just one or two reasons, not just few reasons, but many should apply, many different reasons to understand, to prove the what Buddha intend to teach on this particular topic on emptiness. So that is the background. So then we didn't read, and those are the important ones. Those are the really important advice. How to approach the teachings of the Buddha. And in Tibetan, which I say very often, in Tibetan we have a expression. Expression is this, don't act like a hungry dog finding a lump of meat. A hungry dog find a lump of meat without any hesitation, without any checking, it will put entire that lump of meat into mouth and try to bite, but don't know what's there. So not to approach the teachings of the Buddha in that fashion, even though individuals might be very, very hunger to have a spiritual path, spiritual elements in his or her life, but how to approach should be the what here this this particular verse as like a nice the analogies like the goldsmith the approach to obtain his or her gold. So that is very, very good suggestion. Then we will make less mistakes along the path. Then there will be less disappointment, less mistakes, less heartbreaking. Don't need to blame to the this and that. Don't need to blame to the institution. Don't need to blame to the people who lead the institution. Don't need to blame to oneself, and so on and so forth. And that is really important. Then because we will make less mistake. If we make less mistake, there's obviously less blame will come. Less disappointment will be there. That's important. As there are many many occasions Buddha himself stated the consolidated children, and not rely on the person, rely on the teachings. Within the teachings, not relying on the words, relying on the meanings. Within the meaning, rely on the definitive meanings, not the interpretable. Within the definitive, there are conceptual understanding of the definitive. There are direct understanding. Rely on the direct understanding. So eventually it comes down to individuals, not somewhere outside there we need to rely on. Initially those might be useful to guide us, to support us, to help us. But someday, we have to take responsibility by ourselves, not to give it to somebody to make our, future decisions, our journey, spiritual journey in this case. It will end up upon ourselves. And the Buddha himself says very often, like in Dhammapada, oneself. And oneself is also one's own enemy. That means it is within ourselves. Ourself is the final, what's called the solution, not something outside. Yeah. So those are the things which is important to have in our mind, as when we are approach to the spiritual journey. When we start to read middle way school, Madhyamika school's section of this text, now I'm going to the text, that's half of the, from the half of the half part of the second part of the text. What we have seen, Geshe had explained what normally in the Tibetan text, what we that part, first part of the section is called Geshe. That means a general interpretation of the middle way philosophy. General interpretation of the middle way philosophy. In there, what we have seen in the text, Geshe went through first to explain, the Nagarjuna's standpoint. How Nagarjuna sees or explains the meaning of emptiness. Meaning of emptiness. That Nagarjuna tried to explain from the teachings of the Panchaparamita Sutra, like the Heart Sutra. And as we briefly read yesterday, Nagarjuna's explanation, interpretation, and understanding of the shunyata, emptiness that Buddha taught in the Panchaparamita Sutras, Nagarjuna's understanding, the meaning of emptiness is dependently origination. Meaning of emptiness is not nothing. In fact, meaning of emptiness is everything. Everything in the sense dependently arising. The small things, external things, internal things, including that we all strive to have, to experience enlightenment, that is also dependently arising. While we are in samsara, samsaric life is also dependently arising nature, same as the enlightenment. So the Nagarjuna's, the understanding of, on this subject, on this teaching, on this topic, emptiness is meaning of dependent origination. And then Geshe had to touch on one or two verses from Nagarjuna's, the main disciple, Aryadev's. So that part is called the general explanation of the middle way school, the Madhyamika school. Then, the Geshe moves on to say he's going to explain, some of the Nagarjuna and Aryadev's followers, those great Indian masters, and among them, although they all claim, they all say, they follow, they understand Nagarjuna and Aryadev's teachings, but they have different understandings. They have different understandings, different interpretations, and so forth. And in that context, what Geshe has done, first briefly explained among those great Indian masters, the Bhavabhika, around 4th century, great Indian master. Bhavabhika's standpoint, Bhavabhika's understanding of Nagarjuna's texts. Particularly in this case, Nagarjuna's view of emptiness. Then he moves on to another 2 or 3 important Indian masters. Bhavabhika is around 4th, don't know exactly, around 4th century. Then Geshe moves on to this great Indian master who came to Tibet, Shankarakshita, around the 8th or 9th century great Indian master. And then Shankarakshita's disciple, Kamalashila, who also came to Tibet. And those 2 masters. And then briefly, Ishide, Gyanakarpa, and a few other, just briefly touch on. So those are traditionally these masters, Bhavabhika, Shankarakshita, Kamalashila, their understanding of emptiness, Nagarjuna's, the meaning of emptiness, their understanding of emptiness, then that part, that tradition or that that trend to continue in Tibetan, we called Umaranggyupa, and it is quite often translated in this text, and Bob translated saying dogmaticist school, Madhyamika school, dogmaticist middle way school, or there are other translations like saying autonomous Madhyamika school. So those masters, people who hold these masters' view of emptiness. I'm not going to go any detail, what they hold. That's then the main, reading and the main explanation by Geshe on the middle way school's viewpoint of emptiness is, those 2 great Indian masters, the Buddhapalita, maybe 3rd century, just before Bhavabhika, and Chandakirti, 7th century great Indian master. So Geshe, his main explanation of the Middle Way school's viewpoint of emptiness is very much based on these two masters. Within these two masters, mainly the Chandakirti's understanding of emptiness and the interpretation of emptiness based on some of the Chandakirti's texts. So that is the really very much what we have. The text itself is how it is structured, so that is what we have done. Now I'm going to read the actual text. So if you look at the page 381. So from this 381 and the last paragraph, from then on is really very much, the Geshe explains, how it comes to write this text, how the text is written, and to whom this text is written. Also, by writing this text, what he would like to do in order to, in this case, the dedication, dedicating the virtues that he had created. So now the first paragraph, very much asking, so if there are these great Indian masters, particularly those two, outstanding, the term is used champion, or the other term I use, trailblazer, yeah. So those two great Indian masters, Nagarjuna and the Asanga. Although, like for example, His Holiness the Dalai, traditionally what we normally call, the Gen Tuk Chok Ni. Gen Tuk, that means 6 ornaments, Chok Ni, and then 2 supreme. So in the past, among the great Indian masters, Nalanda masters, the Tibetan teachers tend to select, 8, 6 ornaments. There are those 6 Indian masters, and 2 what you call the 2 supreme, that is Nagarjuna and Asanga. And His Holiness the Dalai Lama, present Dalai Lama, he thought it might be really better to understand more those great Indian masters that we study. And nowadays, we call 17 Indian Pandits, Indian masters, 17. And His Holiness have written nice, the praise or nice prayer with the 17 Indian Pandits. So this verse is saying, if there were so many great Indian masters who are all able to explain, understand, write the teachings of the Buddha, particularly on this topic, on emptiness, within that, among these great Indian masters, there are 2 outstanding, Nagarjuna and Asanga. So whom that you are going to follow? Which one? Which the Nagarjuna or the Asanga? Asanga's interpretations of the emptiness that you are going to follow, and that is here this this first paragraph. Then the verse which start the next saying, revere from the depths of my heart. So this coming verses, two verses, 3 verses, really, Geshe gives his sort of gratitude, his kind of, amazing sort of, the gratitude towards those great teachers, and their teachings, particularly their teachings on, the dependent arising, through the teachings of the dependent arising, able to explain why we are in samsara, and through the teachings of the dependent arising or dependent origination, and being able to explain, to experience enlightenment, also the free from samsara. And these teachings are, these great Indian commentators, great masters, their texts are written with the reasons, with the arguments, with the explanations, therefore, that, it has a tremendous sense of, the gratitude towards all those great Indian masters. And particularly, Nagarjuna, Nagarjuna, the Ayadev, the Bhavavika, and within among these Chandakirti, because we will see, the Tsongkhapa has a tremendous sense of, the appreciations that commentaries or interpretation that written by the Chandakirti. And he repeats again and again, not only here, in the other text. To him, his understanding, full, complete understanding of, the emptiness that Buddha taught, that Nagarjuna and Aryadev had interpreted, his full understanding comes from, the reading, contemplating, meditating, the teachings of the Chandakirti. And here that we can see, in the next in the out of the, the 2 or 3 verses, you can see there in the middle page, next page, page 382, saying by the white light shining from Chandra's moon, and the Buddhapalita's appointed path is seen, who is there, who would not hold supreme the most excellent of the. Also we saw text, the main body, there was a clear sort of light, the Buddhapalita and the Chandakirti's text, and here again it is. Now then the next 2 these 2 paragraphs, that much need to say that much, because the paragraphs are, giving us why ending of emptiness is so crucial, which I mentioned earlier. At said not only teaching of the emptiness in the wild is important, not only in the Sutta teachings and the practice. It is equally important when you practice and the practices, and that's where we can see where Tsongkhapa put it very clearly in these 2 paragraphs. Now here, very often, again, Chandakirti very nicely illustrated in his introduction to middle, at the end of the chapter where out of 10 chapters, the introduction to middle way, the chapter biggest, the rest all are relatively small. Emptiness, and at the end of that chapter, now the nicely the importance of being understanding of emptiness is to have bodhicitta. And his illustration, the analogy is this small cross from one continent to another continent, like migrate for long distance, oceans, to reach to their destination. Their needs, that, and for his or her the people, to empty. And all this Tashi, the wisdom and the skillful, needs to be lead show and other show of the cyclic existence. And these two are the practice while we're in the practicing Sutrayana, as well as we are practicing the Vajrayana. And nicely, put it one of the Tibetan teachers, the relation to the practicing Vajrayana. It says this, and it is to do one of the Tibetan. I don't know. I can say I don't want to offend the Tibetan's culture or the Tibetan things, but only before 1959, only Tibetan cake that we have is cheesecake. The cheesecake with the butter and with lots of sweets, and it is called tu, and it is mainly hold together by the butter. Otherwise, it's dry cheese. The dry cheese have many different. Some are like very powder, like very thin. Some are very tough, round. Take maybe last whole day if you chew. Strong, much stronger than the chewing gum. Anyway, so the Tibetan cake made by this dry powdered cheese, put together and have this delicious taste and nutritious, is made by the butter. Without the butter, it says it is just mere dry cheese. And that is what one of the Tibetan master explained. Without these two, without nurtured these two, the bodhicitta and realization of emptiness, if we try to practice Vajrayana, it is like that. There's no taste, there's no nutritious, there's nothing. Of course, you can do the recitation, you can do the visualization, you can burn this nice incense, you can have very dramatic, painted tanga in front of you, and you can have all those things, but it is still like a fire without any taste and nutritious. And that is what it is important. And this also here, these two verses, illustrated, which I will not read. If you look at the end of the first paragraph, Geshe had said this very clearly, and then so forth. And there's one or two important we want to read in that end of that second paragraph. Geshe clearly said this. I composed this account of essence of eloquence for the sake of those, the subtle philosophical discernment who unleashing mighty waves of efforts of determine the magnificence and magnificent profundity and the more profound than the profundity of the scriptures, have taken to heart the practical attainment of that way they know that doctrine of the victor may long be with us. And this is what it is useful. Here it says profound, detailed, and so on and so forth. And this is what His Holiness Dalai Lama recently says very often, particularly to the Tibetans. If you really want to like to see the Tibetan Buddhism to last on this planet for a long time and to serve not just the Tibetans but also non-Tibetans, then he said, I will guarantee if you have study program and understanding, teaching, understanding, learning, then he said, I will guarantee it will survive. Regardless of whatever external forces are there, it will survive. If Tibetan Buddhism end up just doing some rituals, then he said, I doubt it will survive. Even 50, 70 years, he said, I doubt. And that is what here, it is also connected here in this last statements. But Geshe said that he put effort to really to explain the details, the profounds, the most sort of all these things, in order to have the teachings to survive in a long term, in a long term on this planet. And that is really something useful to remember, to recall. And that saying that quite often which I will read one. Maybe I'll read this briefly. The Geshe style, his style, how he approached these teachings. And I want to read this. This is his autobiography, very small, short autobiography. It is called Destiny Fulfilled. That's his autobiography. So I'll read that. If the darkness that hides the basis of right and wrong is not illuminated by the lamp of true learning, you cannot know even the path. Not to speak of entrance into the supreme city of liberation. Therefore, not satisfied with the partiality and the rough ideas. In other words, when he approached to the teachings of the Buddha at his time, what is available in the text, he hasn't done sort of reading this part here, then ignore rest, or just get a rough idea. And he is also mentioned in here in this text that we are reading in the same paragraph. If you look at, that's also he said in this. I then become dissatisfied. The same paragraph, middle of that paragraph. I then become dissatisfied with having only a rough idea of the many of the deeper points of the meaning, and so made a comprehensive inquiry into the precise and general keys of those reasoning which the champion. So these are the similar. That's what he's saying. He said, therefore, not satisfied with the partiality and the rough ideas, I trained carefully in all treatises of the invincible Lord of Dharma, or the Buddha, and all his teachings, and those great sages, those great Indian masters, widely renowned in India. And then, as I said, as the 6 ornaments and the 2 superiors. So that is Geshe style, and this is what he is talking about. And quite important to bear in our mind, individually, and also, the group, and also institution. It is very, very important to individually, rich all these different teachings, not just group of teachings here and just ignore the others. Although we may not have time to go all, but still it is important to make ourselves. And in that way, the coming generations, a generation after, will benefit. Because our generation is the first generation. Almost the first generation. Although there's a hippie generation, that will generation, the Tibetan Buddhism. I just said yesterday, somebody interviewed me. Tibetan Buddhism is still extremely young, fragile in the West. Less than 30, 40 years. Buddhism came to Tibet. It took almost 300 years to really root. After 100 years, it's almost wiped out. Long time. Therefore, our generation is a very, very important generation. If we get it correctly, rightly, then that will benefit for the coming generation. If we get it wrong, or partial, or rough, or just superficial, then it will take long time to go to the next generation to get into more depth. So individually, institution, all have the responsibility. Not just one person, not just one institution, not just the particular center or particular tradition. I think we all have the responsibility. So therefore, it is useful to have that kind of. So I will going to wrap up now. So then the next verse after the the paragraphs, those paragraphs. The verse starts saying, he embodied, and these, end up to the end of the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, because the first 3 this verse are lines are in Tibetan. Is very nicely, written in a what's called the set sentence, but it's long sentence, so it comes like this. So these, until at the end of saying the authors, this book on the the miracles message. So these 4, 5, whatever you call it, verses, these are talking about how Geshe composed, how he composed this scripture, this teaching, this text. And that's what, this, again here, he talked about, if you read it, Reverend, I adored it on the lotus of my heart, my faith unwavering and powerfully, intense, and that most sweet reasons of philosophers, who sees the real thusness, so that is what he's talking about, how he composed. He composed the text with the thorough, his own, earlier we saw his own studying all these different teachings, not partial, not rough, detailed, profound, through that he had composed, also with the help of those great teachers. His teachers, some, like the great that Sakyapa master, one of his main teacher, Rendava, particularly in middle way schools, on emptiness. One of his main teacher was Rendava, and also Manjushri. He has vision, a direct vision to Manjushri. Very often he asks direct question to Manjushri. So these are the. And then the next verse which starts saying, what other treatise thus elucidates. And this, this verse is, the features or the characteristics of this text, that he had written, the characteristics or the feature of the essence of true eloquence. So in other words, he was saying, in this text, I have elucidated, I have explained in general, on emptiness, and particularly these two great masters, Nagarjuna and Asanga's view of emptiness, philosophy that I have, explained. That's what he had said in that verse. Then the next verse, a verse which is saying, already experts in all sciences of the bodhisattvas, veteran. So this verse, and then count a little bit further, the result of that he had managed to study it, that he had managed to write this text, what kind of fulfillment, what kind of experience that he had after studying and writing in these texts. And particularly if you look at the last two from the bottom, not the last paragraph, paragraph before that, that paragraph saying, with the splendid banquet of totally pure samadhi, brilliant wisdom, and the active ethics. So that sort of things. These are what he had. He has got, and through that he has written, and he felt tremendous sense of enhancement in his wisdom, in his samadhi, and in his the ethics. In his ethics. And then continues the verse, next saying, 1 minute. So these are talking about his sort of joys, and for example in Tibetan, so saying sometimes when he was writing, when he contemplated, there's a tremendous sense of joy or the faith or the conviction towards Buddha. That sort of joy is cultivated. And sometimes he felt extremely thankful, extremely gratitude towards those great Indian masters, because due to their commentaries, their interpretation, he is able to understand the teachings of the Buddha. And also, those other great, Indian and the Tibetan teachers that contemporary or prior to him, he has a tremendous sense of respect, their knowledge, their understandings, to those things. Same time, has a tremendous sense of compassion, have a tremendous sense of, the sense of closeness towards the living beings who are, the wisdom eyes. Wisdom eye is, not open, not yet open. So it has a tremendous sense of, that kind of closeness or sense of great compassion. And same time to have a strong yearning, strong wish that the teachings of the Buddha to live a long time, to benefit to many living beings. So that is those verses. Then if you turn your page, which I've mentioned most, next Next verse or the paragraph starting, the moon of the philosophers shine on such a one. So this long paragraphs, long verses, it is more like encouraging to people really find the understanding of the teachings of the Buddha, those interpretable teachings and those definitive teachings, and have the ability to engage in those profound commentaries to understand the Buddha's teachings, particularly those definitive teachings, and that's what here this verse is talking about. Then the next two verses which started saying, by whatever merit I have gained, and these two verses are a dedication. By writing this text, by writing this text, and to say the try to explain the Nagarjuna and Anga's view of emptiness, due to that act, those actions, the results or the consequences, I would like to dedicate to the what you call the Buddha's teachings to remain long time, and also all those bodhisattvas, like Manjushri and all those bodhisattvas, they have dedicated, they have forward their actions for whatever direction. I would like to also dedicate all my whatever virtues I've managed to by writing this text, dedicate same as these great bodhisattvas. So those are the verses, and the last one, page 385. That's what he gives once again. He gives briefly what he has written in this text. So, and then he gave his own name, saying so that's it. I'll leave it here. So we'll have 20 minutes tea break. Then come back. And the next session will not last that very long. I mean, I'd intend to have a shorter session, this one, but it's gone longer than normal. So we'll have 20 minutes tea break. We'll come back at 12. Then I will finish at 12:30. Yeah. Thank you.